Along the rugged coastlines of Scotland, where cliffs collapse into the sea and caves disappear beneath the tide, there's a story people have been telling for centuries. A story about hunger, about isolation, and about what happens when people step so far outside of society that they never come back. It begins with a name you've probably heard before: Sawney Bean. Welcome back to Mealstownalivefor, the podcast where true crime, dark history, conspiracy, and food collide. I'm your host, Jody Breton, and every week we serve up the stories that are as disturbing as they are fascinating, paired with a meal inspired by the chaos. So grab a plate, lock your doors, and let's dig in. The legend of Sawney Bean isn't subtle. It's not quiet. It's not small. It's a full blown nightmare. According to the story, Sawney Bean was born into a violent, dysfunctional family: thieves, drifters, people already living on the edge of society. But even among them, he stood out. He eventually left with a woman named Agnes Douglas, and together they disappeared from civilization entirely, settling along the Ayrshire coast. And that's where they found it: a cave. Not just a hiding place, but a natural fortress. Hidden by the tides, invisible at certain times of the day, deep enough to conceal not just two people, but dozens. And that's exactly what happened. Because the story says Sunny and Agnes didn't just survive there. They built something: a family, a clan. Over the years, they had children, then grandchildren, and because they were completely cut off from society, those generations grew through incest, creating a large insular group that knew nothing but the darkness of the cave and the rules of survival laid down by Sunny himself. And those rules were simple: if you want to live, you hunt. At first, the clan targeted lone travelers, people moving along the coastal roads, ambushed quickly, silently, dragged back into the cave before anyone could notice. But then people started disappearing in larger numbers: families, groups, merchants, entire parties vanishing without a trace. And what made it worse, there were no bodies. That's what terrified people the most. Because when bodies are missing, the imagination fills in the gaps. And in this case, the truth, if the story is to be believed, was worse than anything that they could have imagined. Inside the cave, the Bean clan butchered their victims, preserved their meat, stored it, used it over years, decades. Some versions of the story claim over 1,000 victims. Now, whether that number is exaggerated or not, the point is this: the story spiraled. It became bigger than a crime. It became a legend. Eventually, everything changed on one night. A man and his wife were traveling along the coast when they were attacked. The wife was dragged from her horse. The husband fought back, harder than anyone had before. And just when it seemed like he'd lose, a group of other travelers appeared on the road. The attackers fled, and for the first time, someone survived. The survivor told his story. Authorities took it seriously, and according to the legend, King James VI of Scotland personally led a manhunt with hundreds of soldiers and bloodhounds. They found the cave, and inside, everything the rumors had hinted at: human remains, clothing, evidence of years of killing, and the family. The punishment was immediate, brutal, public, and because this wasn't about just justice, it was about sending a message. And just like that, the story of Sawney Bean became one of Scotland's most infamous legends. But here's where things start to shift, because historians have a problem with the Sawney Bean story. Actually, a lot of problems. There are no solid contemporary records confirming it happened the way it's told. No official documents from the time that match the scale of the story. And some researchers believe it may have been exaggerated or even invented during periods of political tension to portray Scotland as wild and uncivilized, which raises a question. If Sunny Bean didn't happen exactly like this, then where did the story come from? That's where another name enters the picture: quieter, older, and in some ways more believable: Christy Cleek. Unlike Sunny Bean, Christy Cleek's story isn't about a massive clan hiding in a cave. It's about one man. And that's exactly why some historians think it may have been the origin of the larger legend. Cleek is said to have lived centuries earlier, during the 1300s, a time when Scotland was experiencing famine, instability, and extreme hardship. Food shortages were real. Starvation wasn't theoretical. It was happening, and according to the story, Christy Cleek was a butcher, a man who understood meat, how to cut it, preserve it, use every part of it. At first, like many in desperate times, he turned to grave robbing, digging up the recently buried, using what he found to survive. But just like in the Sawney Bean legend, that's not where it ended. Eventually, Cleek began targeting the living travelers, strangers, people moving through isolated areas. He would lure them in, kill them, and butcher them. No cave full of generations, no hundreds of victims. Just one man crossing a line and then crossing it again. And that's what makes this connection so interesting. Because when you strip away the exaggeration from Sunny Bean, what you're left with looks a lot like Christy Cleek: isolation, hunger, and violence against travelers. Cannibalism, it's the same core story, just scaled up. Where Cleek is grounded, Bean is mythic. Where Cleek is plausible, Bean is theoretical. It's almost like the story evolved, grew over time, each retelling adding something more shocking, more extreme, more unforgettable. Because that's what folklore does. It takes something real and turns it into something that sticks. And maybe that's why both names still exist today. Sunny Bean is the story people tell around the campfires, the version that makes your skin crawl, the one that feels like a horror movie. But Christy Cleek, he's the one that lingers after, the one that feels like it could have happened because he doesn't need a massive clan or hidden cave to be terrifying. He just needed one thing: opportunity. And maybe that's the real reason these stories survived. Not because they're about monsters, but because they're about what happens when ordinary people are pushed far enough or chose to go far enough that they stop being ordinary at all. So the next time you hear the story of Sunny Bean, remember this. Before the cave, before the clan, before the legend grew into something larger than life, there may have just been a butcher in a starving land making a decision that he could never undo. And that's where the real story begins. For this short story, we'll be making shortbread cookies with jam and honey mousse on top. Thanks for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed this short story, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.